keep these remarks fairly brief because Herzog is kind of long-winded. He does probably a better job because he got to edit what he was going to say. When I'm done talking, maybe I can take some questions while we take a little break between screening the film. That way whoever needs to use the restroom can do it at that time. And I'm happy to stay after the film and answer any other questions. But there's so much to talk about with cave art. It's almost like I have to talk really fast. So if I'm going too fast, slow me down. A lot of people ask me, why cave art? What got you into it? Where did this come from? And I have to tell them honestly, I don't know. I woke up one day and I had like a light bulb in my head that said cave art, right? I've been an artist my whole life and a writer, but I'd never dwelled much on cave art. I knew about it, of course, but I just woke up one day and there it was. Went to the library, got some books, came home, started doing some studies, and within a week I was putting paint on big canvases. So that's where it came from, a big mystery to me. And that's sort of the general theme with cave art. There's a lot of mystery, right? It's prehistory. These were done in the late Ice Age, and we don't know much about it. So there's a wonderful quote that I want to open this talk with, and it's by the French artist Georges Braque, and he says about art, in art there is only one thing that matters, that which cannot be explained. And with cave art, almost nothing can be explained, right? And so it's that mystery that really attracts me. So if you say, why cave art? Why do I do cave art? I'm going to try and explain that in a really roundabout way in this talk. But I think I need to start with what exactly is cave art, because there are a lot of misconceptions about when it was done, by whom, and all that. We do know those things. We can date it. So broadly speaking, cave art is just art that's painted, drawn, or engraved on the walls of caves, mostly by ancient peoples. And there are examples of cave art all over the world. And I'm not going to get into specific, but these paintings are based on European cave art from the Ice Age, from about 10,000 years ago to 30,000 years ago. Broad spectrum, 20,000 years of the same subjects. And I'll get to that too in a bit. So specifically, cave art is the first art, the original art done by our ancestors, who we used to call Cro-Magnon man, but scientists aren't happy with that anymore, so they're calling it early modern man. Okay? So in other words, genetically, they were exactly like us. They looked like us, they thought like us to some extent, and they produced art, which is remarkable because earlier, say Neanderthal man did not make art. He made tools, but he didn't make art. So all of a sudden, we've got a whole new thing going on here. The introduction of art and beauty and aesthetics sort of makes us who we are. This group of people here, we share that. We share language, right? We can make tools and use them. But languages, with tool making, we know that chimpanzees make tools and use them. So that's no big deal, right? We know that dolphins have a language, whales have a language, even elephants have a language. We can't decipher, decode it, or understand it, but we're working on it, right? So if those aren't the things that make us uniquely human, what does? And some would say, well, art, right? So here we are. All of us concerned with art today, isn't that nice? Makes us human. Okay, so the Ice Age paintings that I'm concerned with are found in Europe, mostly in France and Spain, and they date from about 32,000 years from present to 10,000 years. And it's important to note, because I hear this all the time, that early men did not live in caves, despite the fact that we call them cavemen. They were not cavemen. They were, more accurately, rock shelter men or breed men. They lived in overhanging rock shelters rather than caves. Caves were very dangerous places. They still are, right? You go into caves these days, they're dark, you can't see anything this far away if you turn out the lights. What impelled these people to go into caves to make art? They did not make the art at the beginning, at the opening of the cave, right by the light. They went deep, deep, deep into the cave, sometimes as far as 3 kilometers deep into a cave system, and made their art at the end of it. Why? Well, we don't really know. More mystery. So many things we can't say for sure. Why? Because it's prehistory. Nothing's written down. There's no record. We have only, the who, the what, the where, and the how, but we certainly don't have the why. The subject of cave art is almost uniquely animals, which is interesting. And consider that this art was made for 20,000 years, one subject. What conclusion can you draw from that? Well, I think that it was not a human-centric world then, which really appeals to me. Imagine, we're not the center of the universe. Can you imagine? It's a really astounding thought for us, because we've lived with that idea for quite a long time. For these people, there were more animals by far in their world than people. Very few humans, enormous amounts of animals. If you think of those migrations you see in East Africa that are shot from a helicopter, National Geographic, or imagine the bison herds on the Great Plains of this country before we exterminated them. Enormous herds of animals. The Ice Age was very plentiful for food sources for herbivores, and so they grew to enormous sizes as well. So a lion, today's lion, would have been a cave lion that was twice the size of today's lion. A bear would have been twice the size of today's bear. Right? What did we have? Well, we had sharpened sticks and flint, and right? We have no teeth or claws. What do we have? Our brains, our ability to use language and communicate, and therefore hunt. But these animals were very impressive, is my point. And so they were center stage. And 20,000 years of pictures of animals. Other subjects that you do find in cave art are these kind of mysterious symbols, which I don't have too many, but if you look closely at my paintings, you'll see some odd symbols and markings. We don't know what they mean. Are they language, perhaps? Are they identified with certain clans? That's possible. Again, who knows? We don't know for sure. Sometimes you'll find handprints in caves, in cave art, where they just put pigment on the hand and pressed it against the wall or drawn around the outline, so positive or negative. In a cave in France, in Gargas, there are hundreds of handprints, and most of them are sort of missing a digit, right? Or they're like this. Like part of the finger is missing. We don't know. Were they ritual amputations that were to identify yourself as part of the tribe? Again, we don't know. So much mystery, and it's the kind of thing that intrigues me. Okay, so the question is, why did men invent and practice art? Boy, good question. And then, why 20,000 years of a single subject for art? Any guesses on that one? I think you'd be wise, from what I've already said, not to venture one, because you know the answer is going to be, we don't know. Right? We don't know. People have come up with a lot of different theories and conjectures, and I can give you some of those, but again, no history, so we can't say for sure, just speculation. One thing is pretty clear, and if you've been in the caves, you'll know what I'm talking about. These caves were sacred places. It's evident when you're there and you see the art. They're not our gods, right? But they definitely were sacred places. And you feel that when you visit the caves, and you'll see that in the Herzog film. It almost takes your breath away when you go in these places. And it's not just that they're so old, they're so well preserved in certain cases. There's just something about it, like going into a cathedral. They're beautiful and awe-inspiring. Okay. If the art is found in the deepest part of the cave, the most dangerous part, what's the explanation for that one? Again, we can't say for sure, but we have some theories that they were either people who were sent on vision quests or trying to find a totem, the way we talk about in Native American tribes and things like that. It could be some sort of a religious ritual. There are definitely two different kinds of spaces in cave art. Like in Lascaux, close to the entrance, you have the big, huge room that was big enough to hold all of us here. It actually is about the size of this gallery, what they call the Hall of the Bulls, which my painting behind you is based on. And the scale of it is important. It's enormous. It's about 12 feet off the ground, above you, so that you have to look up, just the way a cathedral would make you look up, probably for similar reasons. And that bull that I've put in the center of my painting there, the white one with the, that would be this, in the original, that bull is the size of my whole painting. So in other words, 18 feet, just that one, that one bull. So we're talking an enormous scale, okay? And if it's 12 feet up, how did they do it, right? And plus, their images are not flat the way mine are, but they curved around a U shape, okay? They had to build scaffolding to paint that. So we're talking about really sophisticated approaches to art, not just primitive art. There's really nothing primitive about it. So those would be ceremonial spaces for sure, where people gathered to do rituals or whatever. But the deeper recesses of the caves where you find something like this shaman scene over here, which again, your interpretation would be as good as mine. Who knows what that means? But that's in a very narrow shaft, deep in the cave. So you actually have to go into the cave and then down to reach that spot. So it was not meant for everyone to see. That was sort of exclusive insider knowledge of some sort. We don't know what it means. You'll note that there's a human-esque figure in that. That's very, very rare in cave art. Now, you'll see in the Herzog film how beautifully they can draw animals. Beautifully. They had intimate knowledge of these animals. They lived with them. They used them for food. They were afraid of them. They hunted them. They knew these animals very, very well. So they could draw humans, but why didn't they? They weren't interested. We weren't important. We weren't maybe beautiful even. So when you see humans, they tend to be almost stick figure. And they're probably about 1% of what's in the cave art, if that. Very, very rare. And again, we don't know why. We can only speculate. I just want to talk a little bit about technique. And again, and Herzog will get into this a little bit in the film, so I don't want to be redundant. The materials that are in the originals that our ancestors used were ones that were found readily in nature. Various types of ochres that they would mix with water and create paint. Charcoal is a ready source because they cooked their food. Iron oxide, magnesium, that's pretty much it. So they had a limited range of color, obviously. It was stuff that's found in nature, and a lot of grayscale. They often use their hands as stencils to work around. And in the last go, you'll see how the hands, if you follow them, they can make various shapes with them. They often glue the pigment onto the paintings, which we don't do, but they use their fingers, they use probably cloth or brushes or pieces of leather, but they also would roll something up and basically spit the pigment on. There are a lot of engravings in these caves. So there's both paintings and then there are engravings, and engravings are just taking something sharp and carving, right? All these paintings are based on the engravings, and I've simplified them. There are places in the caves that have no paintings. They have layer after layer after layer of animals carved one over the other. And we don't know why. Again, they're in the deep parts of the caves, and we suspect that it was kind of a vision quest. They'd send people in and say, face your fears, crawl back there in the dark. We don't know if there are any bears waiting for you. But now you're going to have to spend some time there in the dark, and I mean dark. I've been in these caves where they don't have electrical lighting because it's a 3-kilometer long cave system, and it's not practical to run electrical lines through something like that. So they give you a flashlight and a guide, and you go in, and at certain points the guide will say, oh, let's all switch off our flashlights now. You've never seen darkness like that, I guarantee you. it just swallows everything. You cease to exist in that space. Now imagine being a human 20,000 years ago, right, going into a space like that, having to crawl through parts of it because it's very narrow, other parts enormous, okay, and you're going to then stop and have a vision. Well, I'd be having one immediately. Get me out of here. Right? But that sort of sensory deprivation would lead to discovering something, right? And there are theories that they believed that the walls of the caves were actually a place where you could break through to the pre-life and or afterlife. We don't know. Again, speculation for the most part. But they definitely had some religious overtones. Okay, I can talk about my materials that I've used in these paintings are very modern, obviously. My approach is very modern. I'm a modern artist. I'm not trying to recreate what they did. You'll see what they did is very beautiful in the film. My palette's different. My colors are different. My ability to draw animals is more ironic. They didn't have irony, right? So there's no wit in their work. Their work is very gesturally perfect, I think. We don't do that. These later paintings are very colorful. They might have been the colors of Chagall or someone like that. There were no blues in prehistory. It's the color that didn't exist in nature for them. Someone asked me last night, well, what kind of minerals? Because I do have minerals on my paintings. It's one of the ways I've tried to touch back with what they were doing. And I've used a lot of sand and mica, and pearl mica, gold flake mica, pumice, crushed limestone, iron oxide, garnet, different kinds of minerals. Space and dimension, I just want to say something briefly about that. They're completely different in cave art. Nothing's grounded in cave art the way it is for us. When we work in 2 dimensions, we tend to always have a ground. We know where we're walking. For the artist who did the original work, you could walk anywhere. You could walk sideways up or down or upside down. Right? So there's no plane that you're restricted to, which is a very, very modern idea. Right? We've only come back to that recently. But the only painting I've done that has a real ground is this one. It's just because he's so heavy, he needed something to rest on. The rest of them kind of go where there's all this kind of floating space, and these are going in all different directions. And that's accurate for cave art. That's the way they worked. They used what was called a twisted perspective. I don't want to even talk about that. That's pretty much all I wanted to say, was to give you some background about this art and to raise some questions and make you think, why 20,000 years of art, why is it still relevant? And I would just suggest it'll always be relevant because why do you have a dog at home? Why do you have a fireplace at home? You don't need the dog. The dog doesn't serve any purpose, does it? Or does it? I think it does. I think it connects us with our heritage when we lived with animals. When animals were important, when animals were more important than we were. They have knowledge that we've lost. Fireplace the same way. Without a hearth you can't cook and you're not going to survive. You're not going to be warm, especially in the Ice Age. Right? We feel better, I feel better, I don't know about you. I feel better if I've got a hearth and a dog. Some people have lost that, I think. I'm trying to reconnect people with that. That's really what I'm doing with my work. Okay, we're going to show a beautiful film now. I hope you enjoy it. Thanks for coming. And if you have questions, actually, if you need to take a break, I'll answer some questions. And if not, I'll be happy to talk to you afterwards. Yes, sir.
Can you tell us about some of your paintings, for instance, the horse painting? Can you tell us, what inspired that?
Which work?
Yeah.
These? Mm-hmm. Okay, well, what's in the film you'll see. Most of my paintings are based on real paintings, or real scenes that are from various caves. And this one you'll see in Chauvet is beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. One of the one of the major works of prehistory. And you'll see how different what I've done is. And it's like, what inspired me to do it? Just the beauty of the original, I guess. Just, you know, when you see something that takes your breath away, a sunset, if you could photograph it or you could paint it, you'd want to do that. Same thing with this, I guess.
What cave did that come out?
It's the Chauvet, the one that's in the film. And I don't know how much Herzog gets into the discovery of Chauvet. I can't remember from the film, but just let me say that most of these caves have been known for hundreds of years. There's graffiti from the Middle Ages in some of them. But nobody knew what the original art was, so they just didn't bother with it. It wasn't until almost the beginning of this century that people said, geez, this might be really prehistoric art. They knew that there were prehistoric artifacts that were portable. They'd already identified those. But the cave art, they just thought that the Romans did it or something. They had no idea. And then they started thinking it through a little more and realized, oh boy, we got something interesting here. But there was a lot of infighting among academics in the late 1800s about whether that cave art was really that old or not. Now we know for sure it is because of dating techniques and all that. But the Chauvet cave is the most recent and the oldest of the art. I mean, the most recently discovered. It was discovered by professional spelunkers who were actually looking for exactly such a thing in southeastern France in 1992. And they hit pay dirt. They found this thing, they went down a shaft, they walked in a ways, and bingo, there it was. Completely pristine condition, 32,000 years old. And that's what we're going to discover in this film, and it's really exciting. The other nice thing about the film is we can't, any of us, get in there. Because this team that found it, they walked in each other's footsteps, they unrolled a plastic to walk on, and then they rolled it back up, they took video, they took photographs, they went out, they sealed it up. They went right to Paris, they held a press conference, and within 24 hours the Ministry of Culture in France had them take them back out there to put an armed guard at the front of it. Within a week they had constructed a concrete and steel entrance. What's there now, they put, you'll see it in the film, a suspended walkway, very narrow, that you have to go, you have to stay on that. You're not allowed to walk on the floor because other places like Lascaux, where they've let people in all these years, are literally ruined, right? The breath of visitors, the stuff they track in on their feet, has created mold in these caves, which has eaten away the pigment, and it's gone. It's gone. It's ruined forever. We'll never get it back. So in this case, they're doing it right. They're keeping people out. They let research teams come in for a couple weeks out of the year, and that's it. They do specific research projects, and then you're out too. Right? They have a caretaker. So they invited Herzog to come in and do this film, but he was only allowed a very limited access and under really strict conditions. And he talks about that in the film. Anything else? Yes, sir.
On the Lascaux horse up here, is that the same picture that's being repeated over and over, or are these different ones?
Oh, this horse. This is called a Chinese horse in cave art speak. You know, they've identified certain horses, and this is a famous one from Lascaux.
But are you repeating that same image on back here?
No, that's one called the falling horse, again from Lascaux. So there are different images.
Have they shut Lascaux now?
Have they shut it? You can't go in for the past 30 years. Nobody can go in. Scholars can't go in. Nobody gets in. 2 caretakers. They spend 2 hours each a week trying to clean up the mold. You know what that tells me? It's gone.
Well, they have created a fake one.
Yes, there is a facsimile that is within walking distance. It's right there.
Yeah.
It's beautifully done. And they're going to do one for Chauvet as well, a facsimile. But I'll tell you something, a facsimile is like Disneyland. It has no soul. So it's very, very useful to get the scope, like what I was talking about, how big those paintings are and the positioning and all that. But I'd rather go in a tiny one with three paintings in it because it can be so moving because it's where it really runs. It's the real art. Yes.
You should let them know the caves you've been in. Because you've been in a lot of caves.
I've been in a lot of caves, but they're not going to know where they are or much about them. I could tell you some highlights, some of my favorite caves. They're all in France, and I think Neo is a very interesting cave because it's the giant one where they shut off the lights. You know, you're walking for literally kilometers in the darkness, and that's pretty impressive. And there's a giant horse's head that is not man-made. It's a natural formation of the rock. A giant room, probably 5 times as big as this one, and 10 times as high. And there is literally a giant horse head up there. Now, if you don't think that those people went in there with their little gas or their little lanterns and didn't see that and freak out, oh my God, there's the horse god, right? Of course they did. Why did they worship these animals? Why? It was for me, it was very powerful. The irony is, on our tour, it was not pointed out. The guide never looked up. The people walked by it, and I'm the only one that saw it. Except for my wife, because I pointed it out, and I wouldn't leave. they're getting farther and farther away with their little flashlights. But yeah, there's some astounding things in these caves. There's a cave Cognac, where lots of stalactites and stalagmites, and there's a little gallery scene that's probably smaller than this wall for sure, where if you step back in the chamber, you can see where they hacked away the stalactites to create what is really like a movie screen, right? And these are places with very good sonic qualities, and we know they had flutes, and we know they had other instruments. So surely they were doing music and performance. So if you've got music and you have no light, but you have candle light, you've got a screen and you've got music, you've got a soundtrack and you've got a screen. Now what are you lacking to have movies?
Yeah.
Movement, right? Well, why does that bison have 7 legs?
Yeah.
If we turn out the lights and we put on a candle like it, bet you that's going to move, right? Did they invent movies? You bet.
Sound and light show.
Okay. So each cave is completely different geologically. Each cave, the art is different. It's just another world altogether.
Well, most of the caves in France?
No, well, most of the good ones are. There are many, many caves that are also in Spain on that border area between France and Spain. There's quite a rich area. The Vézère Valley is probably the richest area in France. Many, many caves in that area. There are several in Italy. There's one I know of in Germany.
Most of the modern men lived in the European area, closer to us in America.
There are some caves in America, but they've never been identified with this kind of art. I mean, we know that the Clovis man and all those guys were here by 12,000 years ago because there are big killing grounds where we find the mammoth remains where they just really killed a lot of mammoth, right? And they had a spear point that was this big, right, called the Clovis point. So they were big game hunters here. But that was much later. That was toward really the end of this period. 12,000 was pretty late for cave art. Probably the last would be about 10,000. So it was toward the end that man really got to this continent. Anything else? Yes?
Exactly, do we know that they're able to have been so well preserving the material, what it is that they used, their materials? What made them last 20, 30,000 years?
That's a
There's
really
not
good-
much
that's a
in the
good
world
question.
that lasts that long, you know?
That's true. That's a really good question. And there's a couple of reasons why things lasted. Number one, in a cave like Chauvet, it was sealed up. The original entrance collapsed or was covered over by a landslide. So that's where you get a really pristine cave, and Lascaux was the same way. Lascaux was just in perfect condition in the 1940s when it was discovered. And that's what the shame of it is. It was like the Sistine Chapel. It was beautiful, and it's all eaten by mold now. So it doesn't take long to undo the
Exposure
thousands,
to
you know,
elements and-
right? But there's another reason a lot of these caves produce a lot of calcite, like drips down the walls, and it creates a protective varnish, if you will. And so we know how old these things are partially because of that. You know, people have said years ago, well, these can't be real, but then they thought about it and said, wait a minute, we know how long it takes for the calcite to produce thickness, and it's millennia and a really long time for that to happen. So if it's behind a layer like that, we know it's really old, okay? But they've done a lot of carbon dating based on the charcoal. They've actually drawn in charcoal. We can date that pretty accurately because it's organic. A lot of this gets covered in the film as well. Anything else? Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.